Today we've come to Angus in Scotland, where I'm going to tell you some dark stories from 3 castles. Red Castle is believed to have been built by William the Lion to protect Angus from Viking attacks. It stands on a high mound overlooking Lurin Bay, making it an ideal site for defence. There is very little left of the castle, with the east side of the tower dangerously close to the edge. The castle first belonged to the de Berkeley family, before being passed on to the Baliol's, who had vast lands in Galloway and the north of England. From the Baliol's, the castle was given to the Stuarts of Lorne. The castle going to the second son of Sir Robert Stuart of Lorne. This son became known as Lord Innermeath. In 1578, John Stuart, Lord Innermeath, died, leaving his wife Elizabeth, a widow, and having to run the castle by herself. Lady Innermeath then married again to John Grey, the son of Patrick, Lord Grey. Soon Elizabeth realised she had made a big mistake. Her husband seems to have been a brute of a man. Lady Innermeath complained that her husband had no lands of his own and had no education. The lady felt her husband had been deceitful and was not the man she thought she had married. She filed for a divorce and locked Grey out of the castle. As this case was going through the courts, in late February 1579, James Grey returned to the castle in force. He brought an armed party of followers, along with Ogilvy of Kinnordy and his men. They attacked the castle. Grey intended to kill all within the walls and plunder Red Castle. In the castle were his wife and her son and daughter. Grey took possession of most of the buildings, except for the tower, where his wife and her family had fled. Grey ordered the areas of the castle he held to be set on fire. The smoke from the burning buildings almost suffocated those holding out in the tower. As the attack continued, the king sent a messenger to Grey, ordering him to lift the siege and withdraw from Red Castle. But these demands to leave were ignored. The attacks continued until the 2nd of March, where James Grey received information that a force under John Erskine, with men from Dundee, approached. Erskine and his force had been sent by the king to relieve those trapped in the tower. In April 1579, Grey's brother, the Sheriff of Forfarshire, was denounced by the Privy Council for failing to arrest his brother and Ogilvy of Kinnordy. Summoned to answer this charge, the sheriff failed to turn up and was put to the horn, outlawed. In September, Lady Innermeath got her divorce, but her home Red Castle was still occupied by Erskine, who seemed to be holding out, awaiting payment from the king for the cost of gathering an army and marching to Angus. In March 1580, the king wrote to Erskine demanding he hand over the castle to John Stuart, Lady Innermeath's son. Erskine and his troops must have left Red Castle by February 1851, as James Grey attacked again with 70 followers. The castle was occupied by 2 men and a woman, and Grey easily captured the fortress. He locked up the 3 servants, and after spending some time in the castle, left with whatever booty he could carry off. Grey was outlawed and had his goods confiscated, but by 1586 he was back in royal favour. Another interesting story from Red Castle: a local man called William Imrie of Lunan was afraid his father was going to send him to work on the family farm, so he decided to leave home. William spent his first night in the ruins of Red Castle. While lying sleeping, he had the most vivid dream. He dreamt that he went to London and while there met and fell in love with a rich woman. He married her and everyone addressed him as William the Laird. William travelled to London and did indeed marry a wealthy woman. He returned to Scotland and bought an estate, where everybody referred to William Imrie as the Laird. I would thoroughly recommend you come here to see this fantastic old castle, once visited by the Deans, the Frasers and Gaulds. Remember and pick a clear day for this stunning, breathtaking view.
Explore Castle Menzies after dark.
Is it really haunted?
Is it really haunted?
Book now to find out.
If you dare.
From Red Castle, I travelled inland to Melgund Castle, a 16th century L-plan tower. I seem to think that Melgund was a ruin, although some parts of it are. The tower is lived in. So I kept what I hoped was a respectable distance when filming. The castle was built by Cardinal Beaton for his favourite mistress, Margaret Ogilvy. There is a very strange story regarding Melgund Castle. In the early 18th century, Melgund was owned by the Murray family. One evening, the servants hurried about, setting the table in the main hall for the family meal. In the kitchen, pots bubbled and steamed as an aroma of cooked food wafted through the building. As the first course was served, the staff waited for the arrival of the Murray family from their private chambers. The serving staff stood around the table. The cooks fussed over the next course of the meal in the kitchen. As the soup cooled in the bowls, the servants exchanged worried glances at each other. A message arrived from the kitchen, saying that the next course was ready to be put out. This meal was never eaten by the Murrays of Melgund, for they were never ever seen again. When the senior staff discreetly sought out their employers, their chambers were empty. The talk locally was of the family vanishing and the devil being involved in their disappearance. The staff all fled the castle terrified. It stood silent and empty, table still set, soup moulding in the bowls, the rest of the meal rotting in the kitchen. Locals would give the castle a wide berth as they travelled past it. Was this a supernatural vanishing, a family disappearing into thin air? It seems that the Murrays had been Jacobite supporters and had secret dealings with the exiled King James over the water. Perhaps their correspondence had been found out, discovered, and the Murrays were about to be arrested for treason. They might have hastily packed up and fled to the nearby port of Montrose, where they might have taken a ship to France. This is very possible. Although surely the servants who lived and worked in the castle would have some idea of the family packing and leaving. Most Jacobites who fled overseas would make their way to areas with communities of exiled Jacobites, or travel to the court of King James in France. Letters would have certainly been sent back to family and friends in Scotland. If abroad due to their political loyalties, why would Murray of Melgund not have come over to Scotland with King James during the 1715 Jacobite Rising in an attempt to regain his lost land and castle? Perhaps they did flee from Melgund to the coast and took a ship, but were robbed and murdered, then thrown overboard by an unscrupulous captain and crew. Unfortunately, we'll probably never know what actually happened to the Murrays of Melgund. Was this a supernatural disappearance? Well, I'll let you decide. We now travel a short distance to the ruins of Finavon Castle. This castle was described by Nigel Tranter in his book Tales and Traditions of Scottish Castles as the hub and centre of all Angus. There is no public access to this castle, as it stands on grounds of a more modern mansion house that has been developed into flats. The Crumlin Tower that you can now see was built in the 15th century, but the castle stood here for much longer. The Barony of Finavon is an ancient one, comprising in part of the Royal Forest of Planter, once owned by the great enemies of Robert the Bruce, the Cummin or Cumwin Earls of Buchan. Following the Cummin defeat to Bruce, the castle and lands were given to Philip the Forester as a reward for taking Forfar Castle from the English in 1308. Finavon Castle came into the ownership of the Lindsays, who became the Earls of Crawford. It is at this time that many of the darkest stories connected to the site took place. Sir David Lindsay, who was to become the first Earl of Crawford, was a great tournament champion. He unhorsed the English champion Lord Wells in front of the English King and Queen in 1390, much to the royal couple's embarrassment. David the 3rd Earl of Crawford was trying to stop a feud with the Ogilvies when he was badly wounded in a battle in the streets of Arbroath. David was taken back to the castle, along with Ogilvy of Inverquerity, his wife's brother, who of course had been fighting on the other side. Both men were put to bed after having their wounds tended. David Lindsay soon died from his injuries. The distraught Countess of Crawford, on hearing of the death of her husband, ran through the castle to her brother's room. The Countess approached her brother, who was lying unconscious in bed, and placed a pillow over his face and smothered him to death. The 4th Earl of Crawford, Alexander, was a ferocious man, who is also known as a Tiger Earl. Alexander hanged a minstrel from an iron hook at the top of the Tower of Finavon. Perhaps his singing or bad jokes were not up to scratch. Alexander also brutally killed a messenger boy who'd cut a branch of a tree on the Finavon estate to use as a walking stick. When he heard of this, he had the boy hanged on the tree after having his tongue removed. It is said that the ghost of Jackie the messenger boy still runs between Finavon and Carston Castle, trying to deliver the message, but not being able to, as he cannot talk. King James III swore he would put an end to the savage acts committed by Alexander Lindsay, and the monarch threatened to make the highest stone of Finavon Castle the lowest. Either the Earl of Crawford was too powerful for the king, or he submitted, for James never raised the castle. But James did turn up at Finavon, and symbolically made the highest stone the lowest. He was taken up to the highest part of the tower and pushed a large block of masonry from the parapet where it fell to the ground. This stone was chained to the tower for many years, but now has been lost amongst the many that have fallen from the ruin. In the 17th century, the estate and castle was acquired by the Carnegie family. A story tells that one summer's day, the Laird Carnegie was away from home. His wife, expecting him back at any time, prepared a meal. She left the castle with her pet dog to go and meet her husband. This lady walked to the gate and saw the Laird approach. Suddenly, she had a violent crashing sound behind. She looked round and to her horror saw the castle had collapsed. The roof had fallen in, and its weight had brought a large part of the tower crashing down amongst a great plume of dust and stour. Luckily, both the lady and Laird were safe, unlike the poor dog. On hearing the start of the collapse, it ventured too near to the building and was buried under the debris. The famous seer, Thomas the Rhymer, made a prophecy about Finavon Castle, saying, "When Finavon Castle runs to sand, the world's end is near to hand." So in these troubled times with war breaking out, perhaps more care should be taken of this old tower to prevent it collapsing and turning into sand, and the Rhymer's prophecy of doom coming true. If you've enjoyed these stories, please like and subscribe. It's free. Thank you very much for watching.